Russia will gradually lower the income threshold for VAT payments by small and medium-sized businesses, Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin announced on November the 6th. Starting in 2026, the threshold will be 20 million rubles, starting in 2027, 15 million rubles, and starting in 2028, 10 million rubles. If companies and entrepreneurs exceed the threshold, they will have to pay VAT instead of simplified tax system. Nikolai Arefyev, first deputy chairman of the State Duma Committee on Economic Policy, criticized these measures in an interview with RTVI, stating that most businesses will not survive as a result. Every year, about 20,000 small businesses fail, and we're not in a position today to address this issue in this way. Therefore, I believe the 20 million threshold won't change anything. Most of our small businesses and sole proprietors will either close or go underground because they simply won't survive under such a threshold, Arefyev stated. The deputy believes that gradually lowering the income threshold will not help. He noted that businessmen themselves have suggested a figure of 30 million rubles. But the most important thing is that everything the government does to help small businesses ends up destroying them. There are sources from which money can be drawn, Arefyev noted. He cited data from the Plekhanov Russian University of Economics, according to which the share of shadow businesses in 2024 amounted to 20% of GDP. If you take taxes from this 20% of GDP, that would be 8 trillion rubles. And this isn't just moonshining, old women or grannies selling sunflower seeds. It's small businesses. This is our oligarchy. This is business, the deputy emphasized. He clarified that this concerns tobacco and alcoholic beverage producers, as well as large corporations that trade, among other things, in hydrocarbon raw materials, which have long since reached an agreement with tax authorities and are not paying taxes in full. Let all the oligarchs pay their taxes. 20% of GDP is 40 trillion rubles, so they can collect 8 trillion rubles in tax. Let them close the loopholes. What's this outrage? They know perfectly well who isn't paying their taxes, and Mishustin knows it even better. He was a tax inspector, Arefyev concluded. On October the 22nd, the State Duma passed the first reading of a government bill proposing to lower the revenue threshold, above which companies and entrepreneurs lose their right to simplified tax regimes, from 60 million to 10 million rubles. The measure is aimed at combating business fragmentation, as explained in the accompanying documents. Earlier, the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, the Opora Rossi Association, and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry stated in a letter to the head of government that the initiative would negatively impact micro-businesses and could lead to price increases and the closure of retail outlets in small towns. The authors of the letter also expressed concern that some simplified taxpayers would resort to illegal schemes. Announcing a gradual reduction in the revenue threshold for VAT payment, Mishustin stated that proposals from the business community, deputies and experts were taken into account and reported in detail to the president. The Prime Minister added that a moratorium on liability could be imposed on taxpayers who violate VAT payment regulations for the first time under the new rules.
Protesters repeatedly disrupted a concert by the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra in Paris on Thursday, throwing flares that caused brief panic in the crowd and led musicians to leave the stage. Authorities said 4 people were detained. Pro-Palestinian activists also demonstrated outside Thursday night's performance at the Paris Philharmonic Concert Hall. Tensions over the war in Gaza have often spilled over into protests in France. First, a protester shouted "Israel assassin" and then red flares were set off twice, Jonathan Arfi, president of France's National Jewish Organization CRAF, told the Associated Press. I was struck by the dignity of the musicians who continued to play after each incident and also by the fact that the audience strongly applauded the musicians, which was very, very emotional, he said. The musicians eventually returned to the stage to finish the concert. 4 people were detained, Interior Minister Laurent Nunez said in a post on X.
I attended yesterday the concert of the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra at the Philharmonic Paris, and the concert was interrupted 3 times by activists, pro-Palestinian activists, who shouted insults first and then who lit up flares inside the room. It was very impressive. I was struck by the dignity of the musicians who continued to play after each incident, and also by the fact that the audience was applauding strongly the musicians, and that was very, very emotional. It is an illustration of the strong anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic climate in France now, using the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as an excuse to target events in France. It's not acceptable. It was not acceptable during the war. It's not acceptable now with the ceasefire anymore. And it's, I think, something which is dangerous not only for Israeli events or for Jewish events in France, but for the whole pluralism in our democracy.
And how did...
Au concert de l'Orchestre Philharmonique d'Israël à la Philharmonie Paris. Et malheureusement, ce concert a été interrompu. Classique, je crois que c'est quelque chose que nous n'avions jamais vu avant. C'est inacceptable parce que c'est d'abord dangereux.
Stigmatizing arts, culture, when it comes from Israelis, from Jews, independently of their own political opinion. It's essentialization, and it is something which is not acceptable. C'est toute la confusion que veulent semer précisément les antisémites, qui utilisent le conflit non pas simplement pour exprimer un soutien à la cause palestinienne, ce que chacun peut considérer évidemment légitime s'il le souhaite, mais bien pour stigmatiser les Français juifs au nom de leur lien réel ou supposé à Israël. C'est une forme d'essentialisation qui n'est pas acceptable. Et puis, il y a autour d'Israël quand même quelque chose qui doit interroger, qui est une forme d'obsession. Pourquoi exclusivement ce conflit obtient-il l'engagement de ces militants radicaux? Il y a des centaines...